Will Spotify changes kill all new metal bands is possibly one of the most frequently asked questions in recent days.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So let's take a cool-headed look at what Spotify is changing in their artist payout system and discuss how it will actually affect the bands of different sizes. Here you go. So Spotify announced 3 major updates coming to the platform in the next month or so, which are supposed to free up to $1 billion to be distributed in payouts among working artists, which on paper of course looks quite nice, yet naturally raises quite a lot of questions. You know, especially since that billion is actually coming from cut-in payments to some other artists.
It's gonna be that simple, beautiful, classic.
Yet, in all fairness, all 3 of those have both pros and cons to them. So the first major update is that Spotify will implement a new minimum length for noise tracks. Here's the thing, as of right now, Spotify counts a song's listen after it's been played for 30 seconds, which, you know, is pretty fair, since why would you pay for a song which has been skipped immediately by a listener?
Yeah, this is good.
Yet still, this policy allows for a massive amount of cheating of the system. You see, one of the biggest genres of music on Spotify these days is noise tracks, either for humans or for pets, you know, to help dogs with their anxiety, or simply white noise for your toddler to fall asleep easier. And while I have absolutely no problems with those, I mean, if they're being played and keep a listener on the platform, I guess it's okay. But since those are essentially just noise, and I'm not being offensive here, that's literally what it is, and they're being played for hours without skipping, instead of uploading them as 1 hour or 2 hour long tracks, in order to make more, and I mean significantly more money, you can just cut those into a gazillion tracks of just 31 seconds, getting paid for each one of those individually.
Thank you!
And here comes the very first problem with Spotify payout system overall. As a platform, Spotify does not really encourage you as an artist to produce content which will keep listener engaged on the platform for longer, but instead kind of makes you think of music business as math, with all you eventually caring about is producing content which your listener will listen to for just 30 seconds and make him do that as many times as possible, which in my opinion somewhat encourages the development of fast food music. And yes, fast food music in metal as well, which, let's be honest here, we've seen plenty of recently. And in addition, such policy creates quite a lot of loopholes like this one, with all those noisemakers making 10 times more money than hard-working artists.
It's just outrageous.
So here's the thing, when I see people complaining about this policy change, and then the same people complaining about the third one, which actually does affect smaller artists, I immediately think that they either do not understand how Spotify works at all, or are simply hypocrites.
Shame!
Because in all fairness, this step actually makes quite a lot of sense to me, yet my biggest complaint about it is that it does not actually answer the payout distribution problem, and should simply be the first step to changing the whole system, which would actually encourage an artist to create more engaging musical content.
Music! We need music! This is music!
By the way, guys, as you might have realized by now, this video is not simply going to be a rant like many others did, designed to simply hype on the problem and eventually say that Spotify is an evil corporation, of which we of course will talk later on. But it is rather an attempt to see how it will actually impact metal bands. So if you don't absolutely hate me for that, and especially if this is not your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing to the Metal Pilgrim channel right now. This would really mean the world to me.
We're gonna have a good time. Always.
And by the way, no, this policy change most likely will not affect metal artists at all. You know, because even this famous Rumble combo, designed specifically as a loyalty grabber, was not actually monetized by Spotify before. But anyways, the second major change is that Spotify will introduce fines for fraudulent traffic, both for labels and artists. And here is where it gets trickier. First of all, we have to address the issue. Yes, it is true. quite a lot of labels and quite a lot of independent artists actually do try to cheat the system, and instead of going hard way and investing in marketing, better production, and eventually better music, they decide to invest their money into cheating the streaming platform algorithms and eventually simply purchase fake listens.
You're not an intellectual, you're a fake and a fraud.
And here's the thing, for my day job, because yeah, in case you guys are wondering, I'm not making enough money from YouTube and I do have a day job to sustain my family. But anyways, I actually work in the ad tech industry, and even there, in the industry which spends millions of dollars on fighting fraud traffic, there are still areas where up to 20% of supply is eventually fraud. And talking about streaming platforms, and especially the one like Spotify, where you don't really have a proper KYC program in place, I can't even start to imagine what that number can actually be. And of course, all of that fraudulent money is essentially the money that could have been earned by actual working artists. So the idea and the intention here is definitely worth the praise, yet as always, devil is in the details.
We are the system. We are the law. We are corruption. Worm in the jaw.
As of right now, we have no idea how Spotify will detect fraud. Even more, I don't think that Spotify, just like any other streaming platform, would ever open their algorithms and say, hey, this is what we consider fraud, please don't do that. And let's be honest here, when there is no transparency, this always kind of actually opens room for quite a lot of corruption. And for many small artists and independent labels, there will simply never be any tool to check whether the numbers they see on Spotify match the actual amount of people who listened to their music in a given time period. And so while yes, definitely fraudulent listens should not be encouraged and should possibly even be penalized in one way or another, doing so in not a transparent way might actually be the biggest discouragement for quite a lot of young and upcoming artists.
Don't talk to me, I don't remember words. Don't try to make me feel alright.
And thus we come to the third and the most significant of the updates. The update which has received the most criticism so far, yet which in reality might actually account for the smallest amount of money of all three. A minimal threshold of annual streams for a track before it starts earning royalties. Now, first of all, we need to understand that the first two updates were actually related to increasing the size of a pie for artists. And that's why I guess they weren't as heavily criticized as this one, which is related to who will get a slice of that pie.
All right, here's an opportunity to be creative.
First of all, we need to understand that there's a lot of new music being uploaded to Spotify on a daily basis. In fact, roughly 100,000 new tracks a day. And of course, many of them will never or almost never be heard. Yet, as of right now, an artist can potentially get paid even for a couple of listens he received from his mom, sister, or friends. And in a nutshell, and I want to point it out, this is how it should be in a perfect world. Yet with this update, a song would have to hit a certain amount of streams per month for an artist to start earning from it.
What?
Now, despite what anyone says, we don't actually know the exact amount, yet it should be roughly 200 streams per year, which would make an artist around 60 cents per year. That's 5 cents a month.
Come on, baby, eat the rich, but the bite of the son of a bitch.
So first of all, to all those who are saying that this update will make all the independent artists around the world who are making their living off Spotify starve, well, in all honesty, if you're making 5 cents a month, it most likely won't feed you much anywhere in the world.
$1.83 American. What are we gonna get with that?
Now, yet that still does not mean that you shouldn't get rewarded for the content you produce. As when you get a $2 bill, you have to pay it, right? So why shouldn't you really be rewarded for the same amount?
Exactly.
Yet still, I really don't like how some try to hype on starving independent bands, because in all fairness, they weren't really getting that money in the first place. Do you know why? Because for a band to upload music onto streaming platforms and start making money from it, they have to use distributor services, and those usually have minimal thresholds of their own, much higher than this one. So all those below 5 cents tracks money is being paid out by Spotify to distributors and just sits in their bank accounts, never been paid out to actual artists. So instead of paying close to $10 million per year to yet another corporation, Spotify will now distribute those among the rest of the artists. And once again, the choice to do that is still not the best from the moral standpoint, but in all fairness, the true villains here are not exactly the streaming services themselves.
The music industry doesn't know a damn thing about music. It doesn't know a damn thing about what the kids think about it on the street, nothing. They just take advantage of something that's already happening and exploit it. Take it down to its lowest common denominator and sell it till they flog it to death, right? That's what the music business does.
So, how will this affect young metal bands? Well, there are two different ways. First of all, how will this impact the bands financially? Well, I'm gonna kind of play a devil's advocate here, I guess, and I know this is not what people really want to hear, and I know that I would get way more views, likes, and comments under this video if I would simply shit on Spotify for 15 minutes straight.
Yes, it's true.
Yet, in reality, I think that this will not impact most of young metal bands financially, because if you were making less than 5 cents a month and this is what discouraged you and stopped you from becoming the next Iron Maiden or Metallica, well, then I'm really sorry to break it to you, but this was actually not the reason.
Yep.
And at the same time, in all fairness, if you're a small to mid-sized band, the increase you will get from the bigger pie is actually not going to be that substantial, so most likely it will not really affect you that much.
Oh, a nickel. You see this? I quit.
But as I said before, there might actually be a second way in which this update might impact the young band. Impact their thinking and how they see streaming services, making them see Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, and all the other streaming services, first of all, as a promotional tool. And this might actually have a rather positive impact on metal overall. You see, for some reason, many bands right now believe that they will upload their new music onto Spotify and it will start making them millions right away. And then they get absolutely crushed when they face the harsh realities, blaming it only on the changes in the music industry which happened roughly 20 years ago. For some reason, believing that it was much easier for all those bands, which are now major bands, which came out of the 70s and 80s. Absolutely overlooking the fact that most of them had to work multiple jobs for many years to pursue their passion and to be able to get where they are at today.
The only way we could afford that at the time was to go on New Year's Eve, because no one else wanted to do it then.
Basically, we wanted to take the 2-inch tape home, but we couldn't afford to buy the tape.
And so I believe that maybe with this update, at least some metal bands will not right away try to see Spotify and other streaming services as a way to make more money, but rather use it as a promotional tool to be able to get their music across the board and see it as a huge benefit to not having to go out and physically ship their CDs or vinyl records for at least someone to discover their song. And for listeners, to start using the services in exactly the same way.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
You know how many like to reminisce about the old days, remembering how you had to go out there, stand in line to be able to buy a CD or vinyl record of your favorite band and in such way really support the artist? Well, you know what? You're still able to do so. In fact, here is a great new band which I've been really into lately after discovering it while making an episode about new wave of traditional heavy metal for you guys, and which I discovered on, guess what, streaming services.
It cannot be.
And after discovering them, I went out and bought their record, and by which most likely made them more money than if I would have been listening to their music non-stop for the past year. So first and foremost, we have to see streaming services as a great new way to find and discover new music and to get your music across the board to new listeners. Because I'm really sorry to break it to many new bands in the industry, but its payout system and its business model overall is not designed to make you rich. And unless we rewrite the rules of the game completely, I don't think that anything will change on that front.
Yes, that's true.
So what, should we all thank Spotify for their amazing dedication to making real working artists all across the world make more and more money every year? Well, of course not. Well, while I still consider that most of these changes might actually be positive in the long run, it is still very, very far from being fair to artists worldwide. And to be honest with you, I don't actually use Spotify for 3 reasons. Number 1, it is by far not the cheapest streaming service. Number 2, its algorithm might have been amazing and revolutionary a couple of years ago, but let's be honest here, by now, all of them are pretty much the same. And number 3, well, there are other platforms which are in fact paying much more per stream for an artist. And unless Spotify will make something extraordinary next, I honestly don't even see any reason why I or you or anybody else should switch to use them. But anyways, what do you guys personally think about streaming services, and how do you think these changes will impact heavy metal overall? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this short video, guys, and thank you so much for supporting me, this show, and Ukraine through this very, very difficult time. Just know that your support means the world to me and all Ukrainian metalheads. We will prevail. Slava Ukraini!